Man, being acquired, that is an experience.
Yeah, I can assume.
I won't use any adjectives because this will probably go somewhere, but it's an experience for sure. One that definitely bettered my career.
Mm.
Before then, we were definitely scrappy and startup. So we wrote the content, we sold the content, we did professional development on the content, we did legal, we did all the things that go with being startup, right? And so you were doing all the hats. And that part is fun. The hustle, the chase, the thrill of making it and then watching yourself win selling it. You can't beat that because it's like making your own cookies and watching them get sold out, right? It's an amazing experience.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Learning podcast. My guest here today is Dr. Shawn Wigg, who is the VP at Math Nation and Accelerate Learning. So, Shawn, I'm excited to have you here today. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you obviously taking the time and tell everyone a little bit more, Shawn, a little bit about the company, what you guys are all about, who you help, and any context that you'd like to share.
Sure. So I oversee a product line called Math Nation, which started with the partnership between University of Florida and Study Edge. During the year, the very first time students started taking EOCs instead of what used to be FCAT, the governor saw an issue with the scores and wanted to come up with a unique solution. So we partnered with UF to create the original Algebra Nation, which over time grew. People loved it in Florida, became Math Nation because of the geometry, Algebra 2 and beyond.
Yeah.
We then started doing core work up in South Carolina and some other states. And then eventually were acquired by our now company, Accelerate Learning, who is one of the leaders of the STEM marketplace for education, curriculum and training and so forth. So we're now part of the larger organization and we're loving it.
Awesome. And it's really exciting because I mentioned to you before we started the recording and when we were first having a conversation about setting this up, that you're actually, I think, the first person that I'm speaking with that is very strictly centered on the STEM space, as opposed to maybe a broader area or any other specific spaces. So talk to me a little bit more about who specifically you guys are helping. Obviously, you mentioned that it all started with UF. So, but on top of that, talk to me about who you guys usually partner with, who are the users of Math Nation, and a little bit more about that as well.
So we used to only work with Algebra 1. That was the original task from the governor at the time. The scores were really, really bad. And it was a shift in the way we did it. So it's really interesting when you talk about education sales, and work with that because your customer ultimately results is student achievement, right? So that's our number one focus when we design. We keep the student at the center of every decision that we make.
Mhm.
However, you really, really need to think also about your users being teachers because that's a gateway to get to the students, right?
Mhm.
And then even to get to teachers, you got to think about district personnel. You got to think about all the ways it takes a great idea to get in front of a student.
Mhm.
So really, if you ask who is our customer, it's like all the stakeholders. So
Mhm.
who buys is sometimes different than who uses, and who uses is sometimes different than who actually experiences, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's a constant juggling act of making sure you're doing ultimately what's right for kids, but also making sure you think about how the different teachers teach and how
Mhm.
districts purchase and how districts adopt and implement.
Awesome. And it sounds to me that it's not only in the higher education space then as well. It's also K through 12. Is that incorrect?
We primarily work in K through 12, and we started only doing algebra, geometry, algebra 2, because those tend to be the courses in high school that
Mm.
get the least amount of high quality support. Once you get down into 6, 8, and K5, there's so many players in the space. It's a lot in terms of implementation, it's a lot easier. Once you get to the higher level math and dealing with STEM related things, people start to kind of fall off and just want to do it like the old way. And so
Uh-huh.
we wanted to push against that narrative and say, no, we also want to make
Mm.
sure that those students in high school math also get that same rich experience. So we do it there. Also, we now done middle school, and now Math Nation is now beginning the elementary. So we kind of went the opposite route
Uh-huh.
of a lot of startups in that space.
Uh-huh. That's quite interesting. Have you found that to be a challenge to overcome where so many of these institutions are so used to, hey, this is just how we've always done it. Let's do it the old way, as you mentioned. Have you found that to be like a barrier of entry to beginning a lot of these opportunities as well?
It depends on when I go back to who's purchasing and who's deciding. Uh, when it comes to district administrators, who's generally your first point of contact, unless you're doing adoptions, they want change because oftentimes the results are one way and the research is saying if you do this, the theory of action is then you'll see the results. But in order to do that, you got to make teachers have to teach a way they never learned. That's uncomfortable. There's fear and discomfort, but the district wants to do it because they want the results. But if it's not implemented well, like any other product, your fidelity of implementation is huge. And so you've got to find a way to work with the teacher to not change what research says works, but also do it in a way that makes sense for how they implement it in their classroom. So what we have found is that the higher math that we go, the more resistance there often is. The way Algebra 2 teachers typically teach in general is still the old way of, there's 1 through 38, do the evens only. That way you can't see the back of the book. But research shows us that isn't the most effective way. So we have to get really creative in how we work in that space. We make the most penetration in the algebra, geometry, Algebra 2 space because there aren't that many people going after it in that way. So that does give us an advantage. And then usually when we're in and partnering with the district, they love our features and things we design because what's great for one may be great for more. They tend to sort of pick us up for middle school. So there's that continuum of learning for the student, not just in those 3 courses.
The continuum of learning for the students.
Yeah.
Huh. I find that interesting because it sounds like it's not a product or a delivery in which, hey, this is just so tunnel vision and here's everything that is going to be happening. But more so, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but more so it is that constant adaptation, the innovation, and how it can actually improve the students' learning, first of all, through a variety of different I guess immersion tools, as opposed to just here's the curriculum, follow it just like you've done with other things, but this is our thing.
Yeah, that's correct. And one of the things we really do is we're constantly evolving and innovating. What makes us different sometimes than some of the other competitors is oftentimes when I was at the school district, for example, as in the 20th largest in the nation, we would buy one edition. You could not get anything new they've done until the next 5 to 7 year cycle when you re-upped and repurchased. We are really big on if it works for somebody, it's probably good for a lot of bodies. So we really focus on there is no premium diamond deluxe package edition. When we make a platform update or an enhancement to that particular product, everybody gets it. We offer, we do a lot of PD that's embedded in the platform to reduce costs and improve scalability. And so oftentimes we'll say, hey, we got this really cool feature coming out. And it's, for example, when we went to Florida, we have always had English and Spanish study experts, but we had a need in South Florida for Haitian Creole. So we found Haitian Creole math educators who came and filmed for us. That way, because it's more of a spoken language. There wasn't just a translate tool that would work. So we had that for families and students. And then we worked with the Florida School of the Deaf and the Blind. And we thought the idea, wow, we should have ASL interpreters as some of our glossary videos. So we implemented that. But if you live in Washington and not Florida, you also get the Haitian Creole. You also get the ASL. Because we're really trying to, I think about it a lot like curling in the Olympics. We're those people who are shaving the ice so the teacher can take their shot. That's really what we're trying.
I like that. I like that analogy. That's a really good one. That's a really good one. And when it comes to, you were talking about obviously how the relationship usually goes through and how and the intricacies of it. But how do they actually usually start? How do those opportunities usually come about? Are you guys mostly reaching out to the schools? Are they usually reaching out to you and finding out about you through online? How does that usually work?
But it depends on which way you're going. Anything in education, I've been the customer side of it. I've been on the development side. It's there's really 2 main ways. The most common way is doing adoption. So if you're in a state that has statewide adoptions, so like Florida up until this last year or so had categorical funds that were only for materials. And then every year it would call for the next subject area. So RU was math, next year might be science and ELA. So you knew. And so basically the districts are coming knocking on your door. So those are great because they're like, if you're available, come present, show us your stuff. And every district does it a little differently. South Carolina, for example, does them. It does like regional caravans. They can have states that don't have cycles. They just, whenever they decide. So there is one part where they come to you, which is nice, right? Because they're looking for publishers. But we also have to precede the market and make sure that our name recognition. So in Florida, when we did our first time in core, everyone had been using us in the state because it was free. It was a supplement. They knew the name. They knew how it worked. We used to do school visits where They would autograph the books. The kids would scream. It really was a unique thing. So you took that love of this brand and applied it to a new aligned core material. That was a lot easier. Same thing we're doing right now in South Carolina. When we go somewhere like we're working on California, they don't know our brand. So we're trying to get out in the market ahead of time. So that's one part. If you're doing more of the supplement side or in a non-adoption, it really is about relationships and waiting for the cycle to where they have that need and that they recognize, because a lot of times it comes to funding. So the last few years, you had ESSER funds. So everybody had more money to spend on things for post-COVID learning loss, and they knew what to do with, buying things left and right. That's now drying up. So districts having to decide, like, what program gives me the biggest return on my investment. And you're starting to see a lot of nonprofits that are working in consulting districts focused on outcomes-based purchasing. So what gives me the biggest returns? If your literacy and math, is it core, is it supplement, trying to figure that piece out.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you bring up the relationship factor, because it seems to be such a recurring pattern for so many people that I speak with as well. That relationship building process and having that trust, even if there's no actual relational or work relation aspect happening right now, there's still that trust factor being built of, hey, here's who we are, here's awareness of our brand and all these things, so that when there's a possible opportunity to come through the door, then at least they're already aware of who you are and the benefits that can come from it. Obviously, there's going to be some more due diligence, just as there is with any business. But I find that it's great that you bring that up. And how have you found trust and that relationship process, or what do you think are the best methodologies to increase that trust in those relationships throughout maybe a nurturing process, or possibly finding new opportunities for the business?
I think in this space, um, one of the things, having been a customer in this space also, was generally districts know what their problems are. We really dive into data. Like, yes, I know that 19% of our eighth graders not enrolled in algebra are proficient. That's a huge problem. I don't need someone to come in and tell me that that's the problem. What I really need to think about is like potential solutions, right? And what my favorite vendors I work with, and the way that I really foresee it, is in building that relationship, is really just knowing what's out there, but not trying to have it kind of pushed down my throat in a way where it's, I can solve it tomorrow, but can you really? Because I used to do a thing at the district where I picked one standard that was my absolute favorite and most publishers got wrong. So if you came in with that mentality up front, I would ask you to show me that. And most times, salespeople may not know. They'll bring someone else in or do a consultative call. And I'd say at least 80% of the time, like, it wasn't aligned. And so I wasn't interested, because if you can't help me with that alignment piece, I felt like you could not help me overall. And so for us in education, I feel like there's a credibility factor. I'm okay if the account manager or the general rep is just a nice person that cares and brings me coffee. That's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I also I had vendors, I won't name who would just connect me with some of their thought leaders so I could better understand how their product was designed and how it worked. So then as my mind was percolating, I thought, oh, you know who might be really good at this? Company B. I'm curious. Could that, because, when problems arise, when funding becomes available, I'm then ready to make a decision, and I need to choose. At that point, I really can't put out an RFP and say who has the best program for blank, because money comes and goes in education so fast.
Yeah.
So like, if you don't spend it, it goes somewhere else, and you don't want to buy something and get implementation fatigue, if you will, because you bought all these things. So I think building that relationship in terms of trust and credibility comes from credibility. What are you offering? Not just, we have a program, trust us.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with you on that. I think the credibility is a great word as well. And I'm wondering, Shawn, I'd love to ask you the process of going through an acquisition. Not many companies have the privilege of also of going through that process, and or I guess having the experience of going through the pre-acquisition and then the post-acquisition process. So talk to me a little bit more about the challenges that were happening within Math Nation pre-acquisition, and how are they different from the challenges that you currently face today?
Oh man, being acquired, that is an experience.
Yeah, I can assume.
I won't use any adjectives because this will probably go somewhere, but it's an experience for sure. One that definitely bettered my career. Before then, we were definitely scrappy and startup. So we wrote the content, we sold the content, we did professional development on the content, we did legal, we did all the things that go with being startup, right? And so you were doing all the hats. And that part is fun. The hustle, the chase, the thrill of making it and then watching yourself win selling it. You can't beat that because it's like making your own cookies and watching them get sold out, right? It's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
After the acquisition, like we were really startup infant. We got acquired by my boss used to like to tell me that it was more like a teenage company. It was their first acquisition. They started out of Rice University, been in a similar scenario as us, and have been further down the road. You wear less hats. You kind of find your lane and you excel at that thing. So there's part of you that misses that hustle and being able to jump back and forth. But also the pro is you're able to get more done in the lane that you're in because you're now being able to focus and get that done. But it requires you to trust other people with your baby, if you will, right?
Yeah.
They're rubbing up me, please go sell it. But when you go, don't tell them that it does this because it doesn't. And don't forget to say this. So there's definitely things we have more resources that are available to you. We learn a lot that they've been through that they can help us accelerate or gasoline on the fire, if you will. But it definitely comes through growing pains and getting used to that. But I think if you can learn to assimilate into it, you kind of get the best of both worlds. And then over time, once the acquisition becomes more a thing that happened instead of like an active event, and you start bringing in some of your startup experiences like, hey, but we did this a little different. Would you be willing to change this process? And for the most part, it's successful.
And it's just having that communication, the back and forth. Interesting. It sounds like I guess the overarching needs to be participating or executing on all those different hats was like a constraint. How about now? So how does that differ from the challenges that you guys face today? And what are some of those, of course, if you're open with sharing?
I think overall, we're in a really it happened. It's been completed during a very strange in time in education, right? You've got a lot more parental involvement. You've got a lot more technical requirements, a lot more accessibility requirements, things that, if I'm really honest, I don't know that we would have been able to accomplish without having the acquisition of some of those resources. Some of the challenges now are trying to figure out what's your go-to-market strategy now that you've got two. So we have a science product that's easy, that's not Math Nation. We also have a math product on that side, STEMscopes Math. You also have Math Nation, and within Math Nation, you have the Math Nation Plus, you have the Math Nation Core, you have the Math Nation Armament. What is the story of all of these? And then how does our story fit into the larger story? And then how do you enter the market? Which do you lead with? Which do you partner? Do you position? What does pricing look like? There's a lot of challenges in terms of, because you get one shot in an adoption until the next 5 to 7 year cycle. So that's kind of the bummer, right? You're in terms of like when they come to you and you have a huge opportunity where finances and money is available, you really got to make the best choice to win as much as possible. Because winning for me on the content side is getting in the hands of more teachers in front of more students. So it's kind of like you've got to win this first part to get to where we want to be.
Yeah. It's about the impact on the back end as opposed to everything that leads up to that impact. Awesome. And is there anything that you wish you knew before you started this whole entrepreneurial journey, Shawn? Anything that you're like, if only this one lesson or this one thing was present when I first started, would have made things much, much simpler.
Yeah, I think I wish I would have known how important some of the things that are small or trivial meant to some of the gatekeepers in this process. So when I was at the district and we did adoptions and facilitated, I kind of had an idea of who the top three would be, and I'd be okay with any of them. But of course, I have my personal favorites, but I stayed out of the process. We could not get one of my favorites in over a bookmark and the color of the family letter. Just couldn't get over it. Didn't matter about the content. They were like, I'm fine with any of the content. And I was like, no, that's not what this is about, right? And we've lost in certain districts because they're like, we don't like the color of that border. We don't like the clicks of this. This company offered this for 1 year. I'm like, well, we could have done it for 5, but we weren't clear. So I really think that although we believe content is king and we think we do it better than most, some things outside of that scope are really important to the end user to get into the door. And it was a surprising gatekeeper in a lot of places. So there are a lot of kids that don't have our products because maybe we didn't take that piece as critically as we should have.
That's interesting. That's something that I never would have thought of. That's something that's would never come to mind to me as you said. It can sound so trivial, but it made the difference between either moving forward or not moving forward. How was I guess the internal feeling for yourself, but also the team when a situation like that happens? Like, how do you guys deal with that?
I think you go through the 7 stages of grief really quickly. Uh, I mean, there definitely was some heartbreak. We're like, "Are you serious?" And it's not like you can go back and do anything. It's not a reset. You got to wait till the next go around. And by then, what people love is different.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I think for the team who writes, that's really challenging because they're like, "Oh my, I put my heart and soul into this." And I know, for example, one of my favorite lessons that we do, hands down, is we teach geometric proofs through the game of Uno. Like, how do you start with a red 7 and end with a blue 5? And we do this transition into like taking it out of this. It's one of the best series of lessons I've ever seen in a math book. It's one of my favorites. But when the teacher says, "I've never played Uno and I prefer crazy eights," and they don't want to buy it, and you're thinking, I put so much time and effort into that. Then when we get together as a team, we always do a post-mortem and we think we should create alternates. This idea with alternates, applets, non-applets, this game, that game. So giving people more choice and trying to figure those out. So I think like I said, you go through the grieving process and then you dust yourself off and go, how do we not have this happen again?
Mm.
Without, the whole thing is we never want to compromise the integrity of what we're trying to create.
Yeah.
So we're now in the spirit of alternate options,
Mhm.
but leading with what we believe is best.
Awesome, but always looking to improve and learning from the lessons. So that's amazing, awesome. I have two final questions here for you, Shawn, and one is a question that I've been asking everybody, so it's become a frame of the podcast. So we'll start with that one, which is this: let's say you had a great magic wand, and you could wave this amazing wand, and it would solve just one thing in the business, maybe a challenge, an obstacle, whatever it might be. And by solving this one thing, you will achieve all the growth goals that you have for the business. Oftentimes, we have many things that we want to fix or solve or work on, but for this question, you only get one. What's the one thing you want to solve to grow the business?
I wish that we generally work with teachers is usually a deciding factor. I wish there was a way to have all teachers and decision makers become critical consumers of what they're trying to purchase. Oftentimes, like I mentioned, it's the bookmark. And then they find out for 5 years they're stuck with something they really don't want.
Mm,
We had a customer that purchased another product because of the assessment book they got at the end, and the district did not purchase that assessment book as part of the package.
mm,
So then they start teaching and they realize I have to do 10 times more work because it's not the way I'm supposed to have it.
mhm.
And, we're kind of like, man, we were trying to tell you. And so I wish there was like time and education available in all respects to make more critical consumers, so that when they made their choice, whether it's us or somebody else, that it truly is what they
Mm.
want.
Interesting. So educating the consumer slash the user on, hey, here's everything that you will actually get, minus or plus the intricacies that could or make or break the deal, but at least you have all the information to make an informed decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Very, very cool. And then last question that I have for you is actually not a question from me, Shawn. It's a question from our last guest to you. And they had no idea who you were. So are you ready for the question?
Sure.
Here it is. If there was anything in your career that you could change or do differently, what would that be?
Oh, that's a deeply personal one. When I first took over as director of math for the 20th largest school district in the nation, I had all of these grand ideas
Mm,
and they made so much sense on paper. Gosh, they made so much sense. Like I thought I was going to change the world, right? I changed the master scheduling guidelines for the courses that students could take and their progression all the way through. And it just made so much sense. I'm like, we're going to increase these scores. We're going to do this. Like everything made sense. A couple years into it, I get a call from a parent who was like in tears. And I was, how it got transferred to me, I wasn't sure, but
mhm,
her son had gotten a potential scholarship to, I believe it was Duke or it was a Division II school. And they were ineligible because they took a math class that was counted in Florida, but was not NCAA approved.
mm,
They didn't know that. the mom just put their kid in the classes and the kid performed how they perform and whatever. I go back to look, it was because of the way I did the master schedule guideline. So in an attempt to serve more students and improve our thing, I missed blind spots that I wasn't considering. So that kid, I personally got him connected to our virtual program and tutored him all the way through until he got the credit. So he did get to go to Duke or North Carolina, wherever he went. But I think I stayed up for nights after nights after nights thinking like, well, what else have I made that I thought was a really good idea that I didn't get impact from other departments? Cause I was thinking, this is a math thing. This is my thing. This is what I control, without thinking like I didn't talk to the counseling department. I didn't talk to data and assessment, other factors. So ever since then, when I make a big decision, I do ask for almost like a committee to say, tell me why this won't work. Just tell me why it won't work. Just so I can for the blind spots. Yeah. So that kind of stuff, I'll never forget that. Just a pure guilt. And we did go through, and the data team helped me check for who might be in danger of this. We fixed it all. Everything ended fine. But had that mom not called, I don't know how long that may have been before we figured that out.
That's so interesting. It's I think often in the most adverse moments that we get the biggest lessons, but also the biggest outcomes or the biggest outputs for future situations. Like, as you said, now you have the structure of like, hey, something is going down. I need an entire team. Tell me what's wrong. What am I missing? Why won't this work? And I think it's so phenomenal because even though it's painful in the moment, it creates so much more leverage, but also much more impact in the future and that's what it sounds like happened with you as well.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Shawn, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. This has been such an incredible conversation. I really appreciate you sitting down with me. Where should people go if they want to learn a little bit more about you, or Math Nation, or Accelerate Learning?
You can always visit our website, acceleratelearning.com, and see all the great products and services we offer. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting random rants and articles. So definitely check us out anytime.
Amazing, Shawn. Thank you so much for your time.